Hi, it's Sam. I'm making this quick video to talk about the recent events, the difficult events that we've been seeing in the world with floods, and of course we had a shooting that's taken over the news. It's also compelled a lot of introspection and opinion about the dialogue and different things like that. Before I get into that, I want to show you this clip that I recorded right before the winter solstice. It was about a month ago. Take a look at this clip where I talk about some of these things before the eclipse in brief. I just summarized very quickly. Take a look at this. One of them being Mars, which is the planet of courage, and the enthusiasm to fight for something that's worthwhile, but we have to remember to be civil, and we have the capacity to do that now with Venus in Libra, and also keep our mind on what's more eternal, which is Jupiter in Pisces. Something to let you know also about this transit of the moon going from Mrigashira into Ardra. Three of the biggest tragedies of the last 10 years or so happened when this exact transit took place. When the moon went from Mrigashira into Ardra, that's when we had 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and the tsunami in Asia. Mrigashira into Ardra. This is just a matter of information. This is why I'm saying I'm not predicting necessarily that it's going to be this huge tragedy, but there's a lot of historic astrological indicators here. This is a very specific thing. You might be saying, okay, well, so what? You know, that could happen anytime. We're talking about a 1/27th portion of the sky here. We're not talking about even an astrology sign, which is 1/12 of the sky. We're talking about 1/27th portion. It only passes through here one day a month. Is it going to make this change? And every time, it was when the moon was in Mrigashira, it started, and then when it went into Ardra, there was devastation. For example, the terrorists got on the airplanes and flew them into buildings when the moon was in Mrigashira in Gemini, not Mrigashira in Taurus, Mrigashira in Gemini, flew them into buildings, and then the buildings collapsed and everybody started dying when the moon went into Ardra. Hurricane Katrina, there was a big storm in the Gulf of Mexico when the moon was in Mrigashira. The moon goes into Ardra and it floods New Orleans, overruns the dams, and people start dying. The tsunami, there was an earthquake in the ocean when the moon was in Mrigashira. Then when the moon went into Ardra, a tsunami ensued and started killing a bunch of people. Ardra literally means flood. The symbol is a teardrop, and also it's related to flooding. It's the flood of emotion. Not just emotion, or not just water that devastates land masses and kills people, or a flood of debris falling from the sky after airplanes hit buildings. It's related to a deluge of matter, you might say, often watery matter. But it's also the flood of love and passion and truth that can overrun the logic, the paradigm of mental chatter and attachment to fiction that we think is so real. So as you see, at the time, I was talking about this section of the zodiac. Oops, right here. I was talking about this section of the zodiac and a couple of the nakshatras. One is called Mrigashira, one is called Ardra, which is up here, and it shows difficulties in the it shows it's a section of the zodiac where there's a lot of natural disasters and things like that. We had an eclipse there. We just had the eclipse there, and we're still in the eclipse cycle because we had that lunar eclipse on December 21st. Now I'm recording this video on December 13th. So in the sky right now, the sun is still joined the north node. This is Mercury. This is where the planets are. Venus is in Scorpio. Sun and Mercury are in Sagittarius, but the sun's about to move. Mercury's in Sagittarius, so is the north node. And Mars is now exalted in Capricorn. and Jupiter's here in Pisces. Saturn is aspecting from Virgo, and the south node, Ketu, is in Ardra Nakshatra. I'm going to put Ardra here because that's where the south node is. And we still have the lingering effects of this eclipse. Now, here's the thing to realize. At the time of the eclipse, I even said at the time that there was a high potential for difficulties and disasters and things like that. But I also said that because at the time Venus was here in Libra, which is a sign Venus rules, and Jupiter is up here in Pisces, these two planets of grace and luck and ease would prevent major disasters. But if you remember at the time, around the solstice, and since then, but especially even right around the solstice, for one thing, we had the big standoff with Korea, which didn't play out, but it was very scary right as the eclipse was happening. But also, right around that time, we had a bunch of minor earthquakes. People didn't die or anything, but there were rumblers like crazy right around Christmas. And there was also, at that time, and since then, especially about a week or two after that, there was a lot of, that's when we started getting gigantic snowstorms. In California, we had enormous rain storms where there was mudslides and all this stuff. And this inclement weather has continued, but there hasn't been a lot of deaths. There hasn't been a lot of major catastrophes. But as I mentioned at the time, and in the clip that you just saw, I talked about the disasters that happened in that, let me stand here, in that nakshatra. You see, I said watery indicators because this nakshatra of Ardra literally means flood. And the tsunami was related to that nakshatra. We had the earthquake in the Indian Ocean when the moon was in Mrigashira. Then when it went into Ardra, there was a flood. Same way with Hurricane Katrina. We had the storm in the Gulf when the moon was in Mrigashira. Then as soon as it went into Ardra, it hit land and started devastating people. So Ardra is literally related to flooding. It's a deluge of water or debris, just excess. But it's also related to, it's ruled by Lord Shiva in the Vedic text, who's also called Lord Rudra. And in the myth, Rudra shot Prajapati with an arrow and killed him for perpetrating what he thought to be a sin. Why I'm saying this is because Ardra is also the nakshatra of defense of righteousness. It's very much about the willingness to destroy based on righteousness and truth. Just like the story of when Lord Brahma is trying to procreate, to make beings to populate the earth, or to populate existence, and so he has to perform a sort of cosmic incest. This kind of incest story is in most spiritual traditions, and it's a parable of how the one becomes the many, how we are actually an incarnation of God, yet we're in form. So spirit dissolved in form is often characterized and mythologized as the creator having sex or some kind of interaction with a mortal. You see, especially in Western mythology as well, the gods are always interacting with the mortals. It's a way to show that we are divine, yet we're in form. So in the Vedic texts, there's an amazing story about this, and this is the section of the zodiac where it happens. Mrigashira is where Lord Prajapati turns himself into a deer to chase after his daughter and fornicate with her to make beings. And right as he's doing it, the next nakshatra, Ardra, is where Lord Shiva or Lord Rudra takes an arrow and shoots him and kills him. So it's this section of the zodiac that we're talking about, and what I'm talking about today, as indicative of all of this extreme weather, and especially as it relates to water. Watery indicators. There's other watery indicators as well. When we had the eclipse, Venus was in Libra. It's an air sign. Now Venus is in Scorpio, water sign. The whole time, Jupiter is in Pisces, water sign. When we really started, we are now having these devastating floods in Australia. An unthinkable level of flooding in Australia, that happened when the moon went through here, especially when the moon was just in Pisces, joined Jupiter, and also aspected by Saturn. This is an aspect. So this is other watery indicators. This is what you see. So all of this balance or this imbalance or this excess around this element shows why we've had this, at least recently, this enormous amount of flooding in Australia, especially because that's really what is indicated here. Jupiter is also aspecting Venus, and then the moon went through Pisces, joined Jupiter, and Jupiter makes things big, big water, right? All the while, Ketu, the node that just eclipsed the moon, is in Ardra, which is about floods, the flooding, and devastation from floods. Definitely is related to Ardra. Not just floods, but flooding. So many times I see there's a connection with Ardra. Something is in that nakshatra. If not, then you also see these kinds of indicators with a lot of planets and water signs. So now the moon is actually in Aries. So hopefully there'll be some abating in the watery indicators, at least temporarily, but there's still a lot. I mean, we still have Venus in Scorpio, which is Venus is going to be in Scorpio for another couple weeks, and then Jupiter's still in Pisces until April. And Ketu is in Ardra for also another month or so. I don't actually remember off the top of my head, but it's something like that. But so the reason we're having this is eclipse cycle and watery indicators. The other thing is what's very prominent in our overall consciousness and zeitgeist now is Mars is exalted until February 14th. Now, this is big because this shooting and this harsh thing that just happened, especially in the United States in Tucson, Arizona, has really compelled a lot of discussion and a lot of debate about the discourse in the country. It's really underpinned and underscored a lot of the rancorous exchanges that we've been having, especially people using it to call into question the hyperbole on the conservative talk radio and things like that. Whether that's a valid accusation or not, it's bringing this discussion into the public forum with great candor now. But we also see this exalted Mars in our willingness to take this on and to be courageous and challenge things now, and we really have to do that. Something else that has been happening, and I didn't want to forget, is we've also had a lot of really strange and mysterious reports of like birds falling out of the sky and fish, thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of animals dying mysteriously, which is very disturbing. And again, this is all happening in the construct of an eclipse cycle, a very powerful eclipse cycle like I talked about a couple weeks ago. And at the time I said this is much more relevant and poignant than anything that's going to be happening on December 21st, 2012. The fact that eclipse happened on the solstice, and it was, and the solstice points are lined up with the galactic plane, unprecedented, 25,000 year event, amazing sort of, recalibrating type of event. And personally myself, seeing these animals dying, falling out of the sky is really disturbing. This doesn't seem like a natural event. It seems like we're having the opportunity to witness something that is where we're perhaps tampering with natural law, the natural world, maybe government. There's always the chemtrail theories and what we're doing in the atmosphere. It makes no sense that it would be like a concentrated, like one section, all the birds die. One kind of bird falls out of the sky. It's just very confusing. And this is the nature of the nodes. This is the nature of eclipses. These are the kinds of things that made the ancients respect the nodes, because the nodes are confusing, really. And I'm talking about the nodes because that's what eclipses the luminaries. The luminaries, the sun and moon, are what keep order, really. Our time is an expression of the sun and moon. The sun, really, the sun, moon, and earth. The earth spins once on its axis, that's a day. The moon goes around the earth once, that's a month. The earth goes around the sun once, that's a year. These are basic time measurements because these are the structures that our entire life on earth revolve around. And that doesn't just mean externally, it means our body as well. Our entire rhythm, the entire rhythm of life on earth revolves around these three luminaries, or these two luminaries and the earth. The nodes eclipse that. They're these dark, mysterious, hidden forces. Doesn't mean dark like necessarily bad, but it shakes things up and it shows us things that we didn't see before. It's the realm of the asuras, which are the revolutionary, eccentric forces in our mind that show us things about ourselves. Just like the story of churning the milk ocean. The gods and the demons churned the milk ocean to get the pot of immortal nectar. You needed both forces of light and dark to get to the pot of immortal nectar. Both of them need to work together. And that's what we're seeing now. If we're going to get to this nectar of immortality, or this nectar of truth, we need to be, the darkness gets revealed. What happened in the story of churning the milk ocean is the poison came out. It was so great that Lord Shiva had to come and drink it all. It was going to consume the entire world. Sound familiar? The poison, the darkness that we're seeing now, this is an incredibly profound and powerful eclipse moment. I wasn't just doing it to make myself sound cool, although I hope I did. No. This eclipse was incredible. It was right on the galactic plane, which is the symbol of the story of creation in like every culture. The Vedic people, the Mayan people, even Christian story of creation seems to revolve around this section of the zodiac. And we had an eclipse right on it, right as the solstice was happening. So what I'm saying here is that this churning of the milk ocean, this poison being emerged, or the emergence of this poison, you would say, or these things that we see, I think is really happening. I mean, think about this poison being released in the air and literally birds falling from the sky, animals dying. Look at the changes on the earth right now that we're seeing. I mean, 90% of the United States is having a snowstorm now, as I also as I record this. Major inclement weather related to water all over the planet. The reason it's snow in the northern hemisphere is because we're having winter. The reason it's rain in the southern hemisphere is because they're in the summer. So we would be having floods probably if it was summer here. So think about these things. It's big, the aftermath of the eclipse. Often it's said that the aftermath of one eclipse takes about 6 months, as I said in my report before, but certainly while the cycle is still happening, which means this eclipse cycle started with a lunar eclipse. So not until the next full moon is this eclipse cycle going to close. But right now, the node still has a hold of the eclipse. We're still in the eclipse cycle. So not until like January 20th, 21st or something. I don't have the exact date. Not until the next full moon does this eclipse cycle close. So until then, we're still somewhat in the jaws of the nodes. And we're seeing this, this exaggerated difficulty, especially as it relates to all these watery factors, as I said. But we have exalted Mars now. Exalted Mars pumps a lot of power, martial energy into people. So someone who's unhinged, who can't handle it very well, does things like go on shooting sprees. In fact, that wasn't the only shooting spree. There was a couple others over the weekend too. This is right when Mars moved into Capricorn. That's when the shooting spree happened. Mars had just moved into Capricorn. I did a video about that earlier in the week. But the thing is that at the time we had the eclipse, I underscored the potential difficulty and danger of this section of the sky. I said I didn't think anything would happen really bad at the time because we had Venus in Libra and Jupiter in Pisces, the two Brahmins, the two planets of grace were holding things together. But I said these planets are going to move. Once Venus moves out of Scorpio, things are going to change. Moves out of Libra, things are going to change. So, and you remember at the time we had all these earthquakes and all these things, but nothing really happened. Nobody got injured or hurt, and we even had some inclement weather. But again, it was, we had a lot of snowstorms and stuff. But now we're seeing more devastation, and since then, especially since Mars became exalted, things have suddenly gotten really heated again with this attempted assassination of the Congresswoman and other people being killed. I also mentioned that it was in Mula Nakshatra, which has to do with assassinations and murder and things of that nature. That's when the eclipse, Rahu was in Mula. So the solar eclipse, Rahu was in Mula, the sun was in Purva Ashada, but still we have these planets in Mula and Ardra. That's where the nodes are. Mula is root, which is also about uprooting, which also can be related to uprooting something that we think is wrong, like killing them. And Ketu is an Ardra, like I said, which is about defending righteousness and truth, but also about the flood, the deluge, and also the flood of tears, the flood of emotion. That can be devotion. Lord Shiva cried oceans of tears over his wife who immolated herself. So this is also Ardra Nakshatra, is of a nakshatra of enormous devotion. Although Lord Shiva is portrayed as being above it all and beyond it all, actually Shiva is he's the one you don't want to really aggravate, because he gets very emotional, especially about protecting his devotees. So a few things to think about, and leave some comments. Let me know what you think of this video.